Good evening, everybody. Hope everyone's okay. Hope everyone's good. Looks like the microphone is working, so that's a good sign. Yeah, what we're going to talk about today. I mean, we're coming towards the end of Uptober, as it's known. It's been fairly. It's not been flat. That's not fair. Actually, October has seen some incredible highs. Unfortunately, they were followed by some pretty scary lows, and those lows in themselves actually caused the fear and greed index to drop all the way down to the low 20s into extreme fear, kind of an uncharted territory in terms of where we perceive we are in the cycle, given where sentiment should probably be. And I suppose the question then comes, have we had our last scare? Was the fall from 2 weeks ago the last one that we're going to see before the final move up? Or do we have another one on the horizon and it's more just of a rinse and repeat and we're just going to kind of bunny hop our way through to a top? So we're going to have a look at that. We're going to try and understand where that sits, where we sit within the cycle, and sort of where sentiment, I suppose, ultimately is. And I'll carry on talking, but I'll at least have this chart on in the background once I get this sorted. I don't know what's happened there. Lost my face. There we go. So I've been away for the last couple of weeks, and thank you very much for allowing me to have this live stream tonight, not yesterday, which had the added benefit of us not having to have a live stream prior to an FOMC rate announcement, but actually just afterwards. So we can talk about that. We can have a look at how that affected the market. But whilst I have been away, down in the Cotswolds, very limited access to sort of charts. And so I wasn't too sure what was really going on. But to be perfectly honest with you, I've come back today. I've kind of looked at the charts. And really, for me at least, nothing's really changed. We can actually have a look at BTC, 3-day time frame on the top there. We're just still within that range. Matter of fact, yesterday, we tried to break through that 116,000, 117,000 level. We have rejected from that. And we've seen a fairly sharp decline today, all the way down to 109,000. That has since bounced to around about 111,000. Bit of shenanigans in and around an FOMC day, but yeah, nothing has really changed. This range is a range that we have been in, unfortunately, since July. And whilst we have peaked above and peaked below, the majority of our time has been spent here. So at least for me, there wasn't really maybe the fear that I had sensed, not necessarily saying in our group, but just across the markets. I think people were still have been kind of rattled from the massive liquidation events that happened a couple of weeks ago. But yeah, BTC's price action, I think there's some sort of volatility within it, which is exploitable. But if that's not something that you're interested in, then actually fundamentally nothing has really changed. Yes, I still believe we're running out of time for us to make that move north, but we're within this range, and we've seen, when we decide to leave ranges in the past, we usually leave them very aggressively. We range for a while and then we move out, and that's sort of, I suppose, how I feel we're going to experience here. Now, I can't categorically say that that's going to be a move upwards. Of course, that's all we're hoping from. But there is still a fairly clear range that sort of we're working within. And at some stage, we're going to leave it. And for the sake of trying to remain positive at all times, I think we will experience a sharp move out of this current range, taking a new all-time high, and then beyond. And how far we get after that, how long it takes for us to get there, I think is going to determine. But we are getting a little bit ahead of ourselves. Let me just get rid of a few of these, because I'm going to use this chart in a second. I can get rid of this one. There we go. Well, actually having a look at sort of some of the support and resistance levels that we sort of talked about in the past. That 101,700, I'll load this up onto the bigger chart actually. Down here, that's kind of the lows that we got from the liquidation events. You all know, I've said it a few times before, this chart doesn't go as far as how far Bitcoin dropped. Then we got that 109,600, so many confluences within that. I mean, just support and resistance on the 3-day time frame for the last 6 months. We've got the fib levels that you see on the other charts that I show you playing there. And then actually, when we do point of control, which I'll show you a little bit later on, there's kind of two areas of point of control at the moment. If you go back for the last sort of 30, 45 days, one's in and around that 116,600, which funnily enough is what we keep on rejecting from over the last couple of weeks. And then the other one, again, back at around that 109,000 level. So we're sort of stuck within a smaller range within that range. But as long as we're in that range, then I don't think there's anything necessarily to fret about. And I'm certainly not sprinting for my Trezor in a sort of a mad panic trying to exit the market. We'll have a look at smaller timeframes in a moment. In terms of Bitcoin dominance, I still think it's continuing north. Yes, we're having a bit of a pullback on this candle at the moment. And whilst many will try and argue and tell me that, it's a nice high test there, I just don't buy it right now. I think Bitcoin is the dominant player. I've been saying that for ages. And I do think that we will continue into the 60%. And we may see a small flash of an alt season a little bit later on, but I'll go on to that in a moment. Total market cap number 2. So everything bar Bitcoin. I mean, we are within sort of that range, but we haven't really seen the recovery that at least Bitcoin has experienced, in my opinion. So Bitcoin, yes, it's had that drop back down, but we recovered 50% of it. Okay, this last candle today, its price action has moved us back down there. But if I go back onto total 2, we're just sort of lagging below. There's sort of resistance, for me at least, at that 1.55 level that we just can't seem to break through. Ties back to where we were in December 2024. And someone's asked a question a little bit later on, which I'm going to come back to this chart on. And I just think we're not there for an alt season right now. That's my opinion on that. I know that people don't like to hear it, but that's just where it currently sits in my mind. And if we're being honest with ourselves, we would have wanted to have seen altcoins, far higher up of this. Yes, we've made an all-time high. We couldn't quite manage it. And you can make the argument that neither could Bitcoin. But Bitcoin's made repeated all-time highs throughout this year, whereas actually it's only been the last couple of months that the altcoin market has managed to pull itself into any semblance of sort of trying to keep making new all-time highs. I think I'm losing my track of my thoughts there, but I'm going to come back to total 2 in a moment. And then we're going to talk about BitSensor. And I think for BitSensor, compared to a lot of other altcoins, BitSensor has performed very well over the last 3 weeks or so. And certainly, sorry, something in my eye there, we have all felt the benefits of that. Not me with detail, because I'm not in it, but even BitSensor, seen it move up. In terms of sort of the support and resistance levels, I actually cannot complain. We talked about whether or not you want to move the support and resistance level. I keep on saying that, but it's a clean bounce, however you want to draw that sort of southern yellow line there. And we've come back up and we've started to actually find resistance in and around this yellow line. And, there have been times where I'm thinking, should I actually bail? Should I just play the channel? But the fact of the matter is we were kind of hovering in and around this much longer term white line. So I've held my own for now. And we've started to see over the last 2 days, BitSensor actually breaking above that yellow line. So for now, I'm holding fire. When we go on the lower time frames, there is another level, which you will probably all know, that we haven't broken out of yet, which I would like to see us do that. And I'm kind of stuck within what do I do? Because it's only about a $30 range. It's quite a bit of a risk to make that step. So I'm waiting for a decisive move in one way or the other in terms of where that goes. But compared to a lot of other altcoins recently, BitSensor has done very well. As I said, I've been away, so I don't have too much news to go through, if anything, really. I think one of the things I just want to highlight, it's tomorrow. Apparently, the US and China or both presidents, should I say, are due to meet in South Korea to try and thrash out this Chinese trade deal. So, expect some fun and games perhaps tomorrow. But for me, both individuals here do not want to look like a fool. Neither of them want to lose, if you will. I kind of have the feeling that something has already been agreed. We're not going to get, two of the most powerful people on the planet to give up whatever they were supposed to be doing to go to another country to have a chat unless we had some sort of arrangement in place. And, it's supposed to start on the 1st of November. They're meeting pretty much the 11th hour on the 30th of October. They've got something planned. And I think this is a tale as old as time. We're going to spook the markets with threats of tariff. And then in the 11th hour, we're going to come and find some sort of miraculous agreement and the market's going to like it. So potentially some positive news on the horizon. That being said, two stubborn characters here. So who knows what may actually happen tomorrow. Just play it carefully. But I can kind of see this having probably a very positive outcome, if only for the short term, but that doesn't matter. And then the big news. Yes, we had the FOMC today, federal fund rate. There was no surprise. We saw another 25 basis points cut down to 4%. So you can kind of see that on the screen here. And all I've done is I've just got a line chart of just sort of how we have been falling. You can kind of see 2 rate cuts in a row. What was interesting for those of you that maybe were thinking, wait a second, it's sort of around about 7 o'clock and the markets have suddenly tanked despite us having a rate cut. And it's because during the FOMC conference, Chairman Powell alluded to the fact that actually there was quite strong opposition within the meeting about whether or not there should be another rate cut in December. And I think it's fair to say that most people just assumed we would be getting one. Powell was trying to spin it that, look, with the government shut down, which is still shut down at the moment, so not the best of news, but again, whenever that resolves itself, maybe another positive stimulus to the economy. But because of the government shutdown, they're not as privy to all of the data that they may need to make that decision. Now, it's not till the 10th of December, so plenty of time for that to come out. But the fact that he even mentioned that they were considering a rate cut, let's get it down onto like the 5-minute chart. Anyone want to guess at what candle he said we might not have a December rate cut? That's right. It was here. Sorry, it was at 6:35 or sometime during that. And we just saw it forward down. But as I always say during these FOMC meetings, bit of shenanigans, market makers driving the price back down, pretty much recovering the candle. It hasn't really done anything yet, but FOMC days are kind of funny days anyway. US market's about to close. Really need to see, actually it might have already closed. Need to see how things are going to play out over tonight and tomorrow, especially with a potential groundbreaking tariff meeting on the horizon. But that was where we were. What was interesting, I had to take a screenshot of it, was prior to Powell speaking, there was, if I can get this to enlarge, a 90% chance that they were going to, oh, wait a second. I assure you, don't know why it says target probabilities for the 29th. That was a December one on the screenshot. Oh, well, you won't see what it was before, but despite Powell saying that, yeah, it is the 10th. Oh, I've closed it now, but you can see my little icon there has clicked on the 10th. There we go. Ah, there we go. It has changed. Oh, no, it's not. What's going on here? I'm just being a bit thick. There we go. Thank you. Okay. It was at 88. That's what I was trying to get at. And now I've refreshed it. We've actually dropped all the way down to 66%. So that uncertainty is starting to filter through. But as I said, 42 days until the next meeting. So plenty of time for this to change. And I try not to give it too much, gravitas or what have you this far out. I think we need to wait till we're a bit closer. This will keep on changing. I mean, you can see how much it fluctuates. Yesterday it was 90%, 95%. A month ago it was only 66. So yeah, plenty of things moving around. Anyway, the other thing that Alan pointed out in Discord, and I was briefly kind of aware of it, but Powell had a meeting earlier on this week, which he alluded to the fact that actually the US, the Fed, are going to end QT starting the 1st of December this year. What they're effectively going to do is they're going to start buying securities, okay? Because the interest rate's coming down, they're going to buy at a fixed, long-term fixed low rate, which effectively is quantitative easing. Now, I've talked about this a few times before, and I haven't really got the charts ready, but just using this chart here, this is the chart that shows all of the federal rate cuts, okay? And it dates back to effectively 2001, just on the far edge here. But just look, right? Sharp drop back down on 3 prior occasions. Dot-com bubble burst, recession. Great financial crash, recession. COVID crash, recession. And we're about to do the same. And I've made this point plenty of times before. Sharp rate cuts doesn't necessarily mean we're going to Valhalla. There is a step in between. How long that step takes, I can't tell you. But it's highly likely that actually what we're going to see, the markets, which are overheated, are going to react. We're going to see some sort of crash, despite the fact that quantitative easing is starting, because quantitative easing takes time for that money to filter in to the markets. And I haven't got them up, but if you have a look at the Wall Street balance charts overlaid with the interest rates dropping, you sort of see that quantitative easing starts, but the market doesn't pick up till sort of 3 to 6 months later. That's probably a very likely thing to happen again. So I'm still of the mind that this is more of a 4-year cycle. We aren't broken. We are expecting a high within the next couple of months, maybe a little bit into 2026. Maybe I'm now buying myself a little leeway there, but I am expecting a reset during 2026, and then the markets to pull themselves out of it towards the latter end and move through there. That's just, I think I've kind of said that a few times, well, a few times every call for the last few months, but that's still where I'm sitting. And that's just, seems to be what has happened in the past. And I don't see any reason why that necessarily has changed. And that is going to impact crypto. That is going to impact Bitcoin. I'm going to leave that there, though. That's just where it is. In terms of getting back into some of the charts, 12-hour time frame now, we haven't really, you can now see how little we've really done since the last call. We were, try and find it here. So we're pretty much at the same price. I don't know when. It was this wick candle here. So sometime during this candle, we went from 109,000 to 114,000. And lo and behold, today, 109,000 to 114,000. A very similar kind of position. What we can see now on here is that move down to 109,600 or whatever, bouncing off that fib level. No guarantee that it's going to recover, but right now there's no reason to think that it's absolutely going to fall through. We need to wait to see how these next few candles flow. But even on the shorter sort of scale here, we have made some sort of bottom. We haven't really lost that. There's no major liquidity sort of north of us at the moment, and we've got to try and get through this level. And I mentioned it earlier, this 116,500, which if I just draw a line where we keep on rejecting, and it does seem to have some sort of importance, because we tried it yesterday, we tried it on Monday. Both times we rejected from it. We also had another go at it a couple of weeks ago, but we rejected from that. And we actually start to just sort of move sideways. We can kind of see through July and August, a lot of support, a little bit of resistance, but a lot of support all the way through, a little bit in September as well. So now that we've lost it and we're trying to get back through, kind of makes sense as to why we are struggling. I've got a feeling I'm going to overwhelm the charts now, but I'm going to try and put this fixed volume profile on. Let's just take it back to there. So these are the two levels that I was kind of talking about. So hopefully you can see that. Yeah, I'm not in the way. And we're looking for where the sort of the larger sort of spikes end up being. And then what it ultimately does is it draws. Yeah, there's too much information on it. It's 2 lines. I'm going to have to get rid of my orange line now. Just coincidentally, look where my orange line is. Then I get rid of it. And you can kind of see where this red line ultimately is lining up. And we've got these two zones effectively. I'll just get the settings. Just make sure that we are there. Oops. So we've got value area high up here, value area low, and then this green line, just make sure the colors are right, is the point of control. So you can see now why we're sort of boxed in between these, and that 116,600 level, which was my orange line, support and resistance going all the way back to July, is really sort of proving why it is such a strong level to get through. And the value area low has proven to be area that we've bounced off a couple of times. But the point of control is right where we're at the moment. And yes, you could argue we're ever so slightly south of it. It's 111,000 is where it sits. But let's just see how this one plays out. If we can try and build some support off that and move back up, moving towards that 116,000 whilst creating higher highs on the way, we're starting to build a picture that actually maybe we're gaining that momentum to get on through it. I'm going to take it off because there's a lot of info on that chart there. Why have I got the fear and greed here? I'm not necessarily too sure. I mean, where we currently sit with fear and greed, not sure why I lined it up here, but neutral. But last week, 25, down here, we've seen as low as 22, 25, levels of fear that we haven't really seen since the onslaught of the tariffs. And as I mentioned right at the beginning, not exactly something you would expect in terms of sentiment in year 4, if you will, parabolic year, however you want to phrase it, of a bull market towards the latter end of that. We would expect him to actually be getting overheated, not cooling off. And I suppose that does go back to whether we're looking at market manipulation or just a scare to bring the market down. Maybe we were getting too greedy with our leverage trading and we just need to flush all of that out. The fact that we've had our legs taken off has really spooked the market. There's an argument to be said there that maybe that might prolong what we do, but I would rather look at it as we go back to my view from 2 weeks ago when this actually happened. My argument is that the vast majority of the altcoin market is just backed up with leverage, okay? And that those moves, those strong moves down, really take people out, and that's what spooks everyone. It's not because they found time to go and sell their spots. No, it's because they were leveraging positions and they got wiped out. That's why we got such a level of spooking. But that does create amazing buying opportunities, and anyone that had the bravery to set ridiculous buy orders for BitTensor at 160, or some of these other tokens that lost 90% of their value, what a great area to buy. But yeah, we're still recovering from that spook. I think the price action that we had over the weekend has at least helped rebuild some confidence where we were. But I'd also argue that the fact that we can go from extreme fear to neutral in the course of 3 days just shows you how on edge this market is. You give me a climb above 118,000, we'll be in the 70s, I guarantee it. And so it feels actually that we are not on a stabler footing as we may believe ourselves to be, because we can just be knocked over either way, which for me is further evidence that this market is actually really being backed up by leverage trading, unfortunately. That being said, if you just need to sort of take a moment to go, well, what's fundamentally broken? Weekly time frame Bitcoin at the moment, we are just having a little dance, a little stamp on the 20 EMA at the moment, 111,500 that sits at, and that's where we find ourselves gaining some support. We are not at the 50 EMA. We haven't even touched it. We certainly aren't closing below it. That's currently sitting at 101,000, and the fact that we're still above it, we're okay for now. And then if you need any further information, BlackRock are still buying. We are net positive over the last 3 weeks for BlackRock. They had 5 days worth of a wobble pretty much after that leverage event, and then we got back to it. And I mean, I haven't done the figures, but you can cross out a couple of pluses and minuses to balance each other out. We're probably about 250 million in the black for BlackRock. I'm not really bothered too much about the rest. But there's no hiding from the fact that actually this Uptober has not been what people think it's been, including myself. There's still 2 days to go, so anything can happen. But right now we're almost 2% down on the month, which doesn't sound too bad. But when you put that in context of we started this month at around about 113,000. We're obviously now sitting at 110, whatever, but we made it all the way up to 126 and then lost it all the way down to 102,000. Just kind of shows you the levels of volatility that have been there. And I think the fact that this was Uptober, the fact that people just assumed that it was going to be another green month, myself included, has just helped to unnerve that market a little bit. But if we can continue to build strong from our position, it doesn't matter if it takes a long time, just keep on building that strength as we go through, then I think we're going to see that stabilize. And next narrative, I'll even put it on the next thumbnail for you. Move over Uptober, it's Movember, isn't it now? Moonvember now, and then Santa Rally. So 2 good months ahead of us, apparently. We shall have to wait and see. A couple of questions were asked this week, so I'll tackle some of those, and then we'll just jump into some charting. A couple of them may be grouped together, and I'll try and do my best through these. But Chris, I assume it's the same Chris, but if not, but anyway, thanks for sending these through. So TA thoughts on Oblong and TauX if I'm looking to increase my holdings. Thoughts on continuing to gradually sell your Ethereum SIPs and DCA into Tau treasuries for more upside. Okay, so this is the TauX chart. So just to be clear, I did buy a little bit of TauX. I mean, it wasn't on the day that we got to 12. I think it might have been the day before. So not exactly the best position that I ended up buying it. But I did buy some. I bought a very small allocation, a couple of $1,000s worth. And if I'm going to be completely honest, I'm unlikely to buy any more to increase the holdings. Why did I do it? Just, I suppose, for a bit of shits and giggles, maybe. not the best thing to do with your SIPs, I appreciate. But the fact is that, as a community, we were going to move in it. We all ride or die together, I suppose, that sort of thing. But where do I see it from a TA point of view? I think it's hard to assess what happened previously, because obviously the stance behind Tau Synergies has completely changed. And I don't know the date. Maybe someone in chat or in Discord can let me know when the narrative changed. So I'm not necessarily too sure, but sometime in 2025, I believe, they moved into sort of like a Tau or bit tensor strategic reserve, for want of a better term. So it is hard to really judge where that's come from. In terms of, just classic TA that we can see at least over the last sort of 4 or 5 months, we have seen this move up where I suppose there was some sort of euphoria, should I say, about their change in stance and sort of people moving in initially. Bit of a sell-off. We have seen some sort of bottoming pattern start to climb out. But I actually think this chart here probably gives a little bit of a better picture. We're now on the daily time frame. But what I've actually done is I've just put the volume candles on here so we can kind of see what's happening. And the reason I've done it is for the last few months until the beginning of October, we were kind of just slowly drifting down. We did hit the 200 EMA and then we bounced pretty perfectly from that daily time frame we're on at the moment. But it's these volume candles here, because as I understand it, most of these volume candles tie in with confirmed announcements of sort of large-ish, in the millions of pounds, dollars, movements into the reserves, and you can kind of see how that sort of spikes in. But ultimately, it's not managed to break through yet. I have no major concern that I need to necessarily get out of TauX, and as I think I alluded to, I probably won't. If I did, I'd be at a loss at the moment, so there's no point doing that. If I was just to judge it on the merits, I'm going to take the vector candles out. From an EMA point of view, strong move up, moved away. We've come back, retested some key levels, especially the 200 EMA and the daily, broken through, and we're sort of just using the EMAs in the form that we would to find support. Maybe it comes all the way back down to the 50. It has touched that recently before moving back up. In terms of Oblong, I don't own any. I probably won't own any. If I do, it'll be a very similar size. Again, I know that this has changed its narrative, but it's difficult to judge because you take the history of this company, and at one stage, we're talking hundreds of thousands of dollars. It was worth. So it's kind of not really fair to judge it based on that. And again, I don't know how long it's potentially moved within that, but certainly within the last 6 months, you could argue that there's some sort of bottoming pattern here. We just need to get above that 50 EMA, and more ideally, probably breaking that $4 level, get above the 200 EMA, start climbing out, and then get everything else going through. And until then, the threat or the fear is that all we do is move up, hit this, and come back down. Is it worth waiting a dollar's worth of movement to find that out? So it all depends on your risk appetite. Maybe you just want to phase in on that one. Hope that helps, Chris. In terms of your Ethereum SIPs, etc., that is a tough one because as things currently stand at the moment, I know we talked last week about the FCA sort of allowing Bitcoin and Ethereum ETFs to be put into pension portfolios, but we don't actually have a direct, Ethereum access to that anymore. So if you sell it, you can't change your mind to go back into it. It sounds like you've already started to sell it, whether or not you're continuing. That is just whichever horse you want to back within this race. There's an argument that certainly can be said that Ethereum has not done very well this cycle. So have you really gained much in this cycle? I think you must have had to put it in pre-2020, so you probably still have. But the risk is that, this is not necessarily bit tensor related, but as a altcoin, it is still fairly new, still fairly unproven. At least Ethereum has some history behind it, 2016, I suppose, 15, 16. I don't really want to comment on whether or not you should continue to sell it. If it was me, I probably wouldn't because I already have a Tau bag. So, and I don't have any Ethereum. So, that would be my opinion on that one. Can't remember if there was a second part to it. No. Okay. Next one here. Well, the one you put underneath, Chris, can you discuss your current thoughts on Tau prices in time? I'll come back to that one, just because we're going to talk in detail about Tau prices in a moment and my thoughts on the halving. Promise you I'll remember to cover that. The next one I want to talk about is, it kind of links with what Himal sort of talked about with virtual as well. So you've gone and said, if I had new fiat to add into new cryptos, what cryptos would I consider, especially if you already are Tau heavy? And then you've asked about the gas BTC play. So what would I do? I'll have this chart on at the moment, but I suppose the question, it's almost a bit of a leading question there, because you already alluded to the fact that you've got BitTensor. So I don't know if you were saying, should you buy some more BitTensor or should you have a look somewhere else? So I'm just going to assume you've got enough BitTensor and you're looking at other options there. And I think the question that I have tried to talk about for the last 6 months is, why do we think altcoins are going to do it this cycle? And that's probably the heart of the question that you're asking. If you had new fiat to put into crypto, what's your best bang for your buck? I'm not so sure that putting it in altcoins is the best play. And let me try and use a couple of charts to, instead of you guys just automatically dismissing it because in your heart you hope that the altcoins are going to have that amazing season that we've seen in previous cycles, and maybe just have a look at some charts over the last couple of months or last year or so to kind of suggest that maybe altcoins are just not it right now, and then you can have your opinion after that. So what we can see on this chart at the moment, and this is an old chart that I've not really changed for a very long time. We're on the linear time frame just for now. I'll move on to logarithmic in a moment. And what you can kind of see is the typical 4 years within the previous cycles that we've had, where there's been a year bear market where we go to stables, then that year 1 where we kind of start to recover. It's kind of very Bitcoin heavy. Year 2, still very BTC, but at some stage we kind of move into alts. And then year 3, parabolic blow off year. It's where altcoins should really be outshining Bitcoin, and we start to see those big moves. So this is the Bitcoin price in the yellow line. I've got rid of the bars, and we can kind of see we are in this phase, okay? And Bitcoin has worked quite well through these phases, to be fair. Year 3, it does look like it's stalling a little bit. I mean, it's still made all-time high, but we're not making the big moves that we've made in previous years. And you think, well, it's probably because altcoins have taken over. But if we actually throw on, I'll be generous to start with and put on total 2, and you look at it on the linear chart here. Now we've lost the bars, if you will, sorry, the blocks to kind of signify the years, but you can kind of see this down here, 2017, big move up in total 2. Yeah, that was the alt season. It was massive. And we're on a linear chart here. When I put it on the log chart, you'll see it a bit better. 2021, massive move for altcoins, including Ethereum. And that's the alt season we felt. And this one looks pretty good, a big move up. But actually, we've only just cleared and now retesting where we got to the peak of the last one. We haven't really made that move. If I actually move it onto a linear chart, sorry, a logarithmic chart, you can actually see we really have flatlined on altcoins, whereas in previous cycles, you can still see how big those moves up were. And it actually looks worse when you put it on total 3. And we can see just how big altcoin moves were taking out Bitcoin and Ethereum, whereas now we haven't really had that flavor and that move. So I don't think that altcoins are moving as we've seen in the past. And so I agree that some altcoins will do well. There are altcoins right now that are massively outperforming Bitcoin, like Virtues, which we're going to have a look at in a moment. But as a whole, there's something not quite right. Altcoins just aren't working as they've worked in the past. And yes, we can hope and pray that that's how it's going to be. But if I was to introduce new fiat now, I would be questioning what was the motivation behind it. Because you are either believing that the cycle is going to end soon, so you're just hoping that you're going to catch an alt season, or you don't care and you're in it for the long haul. And if that's the case, have altcoins really proven themselves from cycle to cycle? You know, I was a big Polkadot fan last cycle and I tried to be this cycle. That didn't work out for me. And And so is it safe to hold on to an altcoin through cycles? I'll leave you to make that judgment there. But if we have a look at altcoins in a little bit more detail, the final bit to answer your question, and then we'll actually have a look at some of the charts there. So what I've done here, we've got total 2, okay? And you can kind of see, let me just get rid of this white line. So December 2024, 9 months ago, end of the Trump rally after the election, pretty much our biggest alt season in the last 12 months in terms of percentage gain. And altcoins, including Ethereum, stood at 1.61 trillion. Then we had that run up prior to the liquidation crash. And you can kind of see, I'm just taking it to where the bar closed. We peaked at 1.74 trillion, which is $130 billion extra effectively in the last year. It's actually about 10 months. That's all we've managed to do. And I say all because let's have a look at that. So let's take Ethereum out of the equation. Although Ethereum hasn't really moved, if we take that out of the equation, we can kind of just run those same figures again. So we'll just put this on the top. So we're 113 trillion, or sorry, 1.13 trillion, apologies there. And we peaked, I'll be generous this time, we'll take it all the way to the wick. So 1.19 trillion, so $60 billion, okay, in 12 months have come into total 3. So that, doesn't seem like a particularly good move anyway, but now this is going to blow your mind. Well, maybe not, but it should. Over that same period, we're looking at USDT now. They're the 2 levels. So back in December, same level, the USDT was 140 billion. Now, well, its next level is 182 billion, an increase of 42 billion. So of all, which bear in mind, USDT is included within total 3, that 60 billion move, 40 billion of that is in a stable coin. Now, only one stable coin. We've not even added USDC, how much they have moved, probably a couple of billion over that period. So already we can kind of see that the total 3 altcoin market actually has moved up, vast majority, 2/3 by this. Now, I appreciate you're going to say, Harry, there's 22 million altcoins in there. Some are going to go up, some are going to go down. And I accept that. If you want to dive into the weeds, then have at it. But just off that figure alone, you can kind of see that altcoins haven't really done anything in the last 10 months. But then I'll add another one just to, help try and cement this, I suppose, through BNB. Okay, BNB has had a pretty good move as of late. And if we have a look at it here, back in December of 2024, $750 per BNB. And then by the time we got to that peak, we're talking about quite 1,300. So it's an increase in value per token of $550. It's not a market cap, so we need to work that out. And I have gone and done that for you. So historically, I've gone back, I've had a look to 5th of December when we're talking about, actually closed at 714. So I'm robbing myself a little bit here, but 102 billion, 103 almost billion. So take 714 divided by, or take 102 billion divided by 714, and I can tell you, because I did the maths earlier, it's 144,006,815 BNB tokens circulating then, okay? So, and we need to know that because we know that there is an emission rate. Where is it now? It's 137, so actually they've burnt 7 million of them over that time. So then when we run those figures and we think, right, okay, so there's a difference of, we take that $550 difference, 750 to 1,300 at that peak, we times it by that circulating supply, it comes out at 76 billion. So that movement in that year actually increased another 76 billion on top of the 40 billion, which should have taken us to 110 billion, but we only had 60 billion in total, which just goes to show that when we start to get lower down in, and we don't have to go that far through altcoins, we can really see how much altcoins have actually struggled. Very long way of winded of me saying, I'm not sure, Chris, that if you have new fiat, putting it in altcoins is where the smart play would be. Now, it could be a gamble and you might be willing and happy to take that risk. And if that's so, then absolutely go at it. But if not, I'm not sure it's the right stage in the market to be playing in there. Altcoins haven't really done that much, in my opinion. I wish they had, because I'm pretty much 50% in altcoins myself. So I wish they had, but they haven't. Doesn't mean they can't. I accept that. But we are certainly not seeing them move as we have seen in previous cycles, which again begs the question, is the only reason that Bitcoin has moved because of ETFs? It's a conversation for another day, I accept, but I'm not really on board with maybe just moving new fiat into a different altcoin at this stage. And I will say, I'm not bad-mouthing, altcoins. If you manage to get the right altcoin at the beginning of the bull cycle, so end of 2022, beginning of 2023, you got into Solana, $8, $10, $12. So $200 now. What a great move. You got into BitTensor, $35, $300, $400 now. What a fantastic move. But we didn't. And so chopping and changing now, or trying to find something now where we're getting towards the end, I don't think it's necessarily the right play. You've asked me to look at gas BTC, which I will do. Then we'll have a check of Virtues. And then I'll try and be a bit more positive on the charts after that. So if we just get another chart up here and we have a look at, what chart am I on? What chart do I want to be on? This one. We have a look at gas BTC. What have I drawn here in the past? Do I think gas BTC is the play? If I can be perfectly honest with you, Chris, let's put it on the weekly. I would argue that we should be forgetting about a gas BTC trade. The gas BTC trade worked for us in the past because of stability. Yeah, because we had a bottom that we could use as an entry point. And then we just waited for the spikes. But for the last 18 months, we haven't found a bottom. I mean, where do you know when's a good time to convert your BTC into gas, to wait for that spike? You don't. And so because of that, you may convert it and then just lose value for 6 months. So for me, I would personally, and I have, just forget about the gas BTC play. It worked for a while for us and it was profitable. And I wasn't, but the last time it worked very well, October 23, so 2 years ago, that massive move when gas went from about $2 to $30. What a great move. But since then, it's done nothing. So I wouldn't waste my precious BTC on that move, if I'm being perfectly honest with you. And then Virtuals, this is now going, I just want to read the full question from Email. Was Virtuals been swinging hard lately? Technically, how does it stack up against SUI in structure and volume? Is the upswing signs of a real bull phase setup or still short-term noise? Is it worth holding speculatively in the coming bull run? The meme of AI coins, if you will. So Virtuals, that's two things I want to do. Let's just bring it up on here. I mean, we're going to look at the proper trading view chart, but has any chart just summarized exactly what I said 5 minutes ago? You look at Virtuals and I got into it late. I got into it around this time, probably around about $3, I think. Might have been $2.60, but it wasn't a great price that I got in. But look, that December, beginning of January makes its all-time high. Since then, fallen down. And yes, it has gone from 65 to $1.50 in the last 7 days. But it hasn't even cleared what it made in July. So obviously, if you've been able to get at the right side of this from 7 days ago, it's been a great move to have, and well done if you have. But in terms of just an altcoin to hold, hoping it's gone there, it's got a 3x from where it currently is right now, just to outdo its all-time high, and never mind where it is from before. So I think this kind of summarized my point quite well. But that being said, we have a look at it on its actual chart. And let's get it on this one, daily time frame. Okay. So we had this red candle. I think for all intents and purposes, or what we're now going to talk about, assuming you're going to spot trade this, I think you can ignore that candle. That candle, cascading liquidation event across the whole of the market. order books just completely wiped out. Order resumed, and it came back down, settled down at sort of 75 cents, where it managed to hold itself for a couple of weeks before we have seen, and you're right, we've seen this move. And what I would say to credit it is, even on the daily time frame, it managed to break through all of these EMAs, holding it back with vector candles, and at the moment it's currently holding above them, and it's got all of the ones that are going to be its concern below it. It has left vectors in its zone, so there's definitely that we need to consider, and maybe we get a pullback ultimately to take 50% of this vector zone out, sort of hitting that 50 EMA and then making a recovery from that. I don't think you can necessarily rule that one out. I didn't bring Sui up. Let's just get Sui. Crypto. Don't want that. Let's get a Binance one, shall we? I mean, Sui looked fairly similar in terms of liquidation event, kind of recovered back to a stable level it's been, but Virtuals has made that move since. There are, what I would say for Sui, and for a lot that haven't recovered it yet, there is that trap liquidity there, which for me is key for the market maker to go after. And I think, ultimately we will take that. We haven't lost the 800 EMA down here, so we're still finding it, but we are fighting all of the EMAs there. This may be a slower progress to get through, but that move hasn't happened, whereas on Virtues, it has now happened. Maybe we're just seeing the signs of what's coming in the future. In terms of where Virtuals could go from here, I think that $2.10 is its next main target, just to sort of take out this shoulder from here. And then it needs to start challenging where we were at the beginning of the year, all the way back up at $4. I can't tell you where I got out. If I made anything, I didn't make a lot. But I do agree with you in terms of the memes of AI. That's exactly what I think it is. And I don't know if memes have happened to have moved a little bit, and so this is piggybacked off that one. But from a speculative holder, have at it. I think it really is a meme of AI, and I think if you can, if some of these agents, these meme-like agents, start to pop off, then where they're going to be based, where they're going to get them from, it's going to be off the Virtuals protocol. So you may see an uptick from that. Would I be moving a large portion of my portfolio into it? No, absolutely not. So yes, that's where that one is. The last question, someone sent me a DM about my Bitcoin retirement plan presentation from the Cuddle. I don't believe it's been released yet. I to be honest, I couldn't be bothered to check through Telegram to try and find it, because a lot of posts get put on Telegram. But I did message Lewis, and he hasn't got back to me yet. But when he does, I will let you know. For those of you who didn't make and see it live in the Cuddle, you'll then get a recording of it. Effectively, it was just about a long-term play in terms of holding Bitcoin and then having a look at some calculations and some power laws and everything else as to what that would actually mean in terms of how much you wanted per year in your retirement. Anyway, if it, for whatever reason, is corrupted and it can't be done, I'll maybe look at doing it again. But I've asked Lewis, I just haven't got a response back yet. Right, last bit on sort of summarizing that point. I should have probably covered it a little bit earlier. When we look at the alt season index at the moment, we're getting closer to the Bitcoin season than we are an altcoin season, which goes back to where I think with Bitcoin dominance having that run up, and if we sort of take that final move up, maybe altcoins get a little bit of a death rally at the end. But how fast, how strong, how long, I couldn't tell you. But I've said this many times. Once we breach that 75 level, we don't stay in an alt season for long. They burn bright, they burn fast, and you've got to bear that in mind. And when we lose it, more often than not, we come back down to a Bitcoin season. And I just started sort of scrolling through. So previously, we came back down. Previously, we came back down. Previously, we stayed in at least a decent-ish amount of time, but we came back down. Up here, came back down. Over here, came back down. Here, came back down. You get the point. Here, came back down. This one, we came back down. I will stand an argument, actually, in 2019, we came down, we didn't hit it, we came back up. So there you go. Once in the last 5 years has altcoins season actually being able to turn itself around before Bitcoin taking over. And I know that's no exact science, but I think it just goes to show that we need to build momentum. And going back to whether or not the market is spooked, maybe Bitcoin isn't spooked. Maybe Bitcoin is just building strong and it's going to start to move. But I think it's going to take some time for confidence to return to altcoins to then make that next move up. So for me, I personally think that this will head back down. I'm not going to say how long it'll stay back down in here for. Hopefully a long time. That will just prolong whatever season we're going to get. And then maybe we get that final sharp move up. But if we do get above that 75, just remember, it's not going to last too long. Even in previous cycles, 2017, 2021. Okay, right. Let's have a look at what a time frame on. 5-minute time frame. Oof. Okay. Bitcoin main charts here. Start going through some of these, and then we'll knock it on the head. Sorry. Cheers, it's Harry. When do you foresee the UK following US with rate cuts? We have been cutting rates, I believe. Sorry, I should have answered this one earlier. It's not FedWatch. I've got a site that will tell me. Just consent for now. Indicators, no markets. Sorry, I'm trying to find it. United Kingdom. Not inflation, where's interest rates? So we're at 4. Yeah, I mean, we have been slowly cutting. So the last cut was July. I mean, hey, we got a budget this month, next month, so I'm not calling anything right now. We are much closer to a recession, I would argue, than the US. But yeah, I agree. Nothing but chop these last couple of weeks. Yeah, and Harrison, the BTC reply on presentation was released a long time ago. I've seen it. Okay, it has been released. Thank you. I'll do a search, try and find it. I'll send it. But thank you, Harry, for that one. Right. Back to here. Okay. So Bitcoin. Now we're kind of having a look at it with a little bit more information. Daily time frame at the moment, and I think there's reasons to be optimistic, but cautiously over the last couple of weeks. So yes, this is it. The cascade in it. That was it. We came back to the 50 EMA, and then we had another bite a week later, and this one's what took us down to 102,000. But since then, we found some support on the 200 EMA. We've started to climb through. We did break the 50, but we couldn't get through the cloud, and we come back down. But we've started to chip away at this red vector candle, and this red vector candle is effectively what's giving me a little bit of hope, because I accept there is a vector candle here. Like if we go on a lower time frame, there'll be one down there. But ultimately, we know in these ranges, we recover vectors. And we've started to make a go at this. And if we can get some positive news events that just give that sentiment back to the market, then I think we are going to see this get eaten into. And we've not massively lost the 50 EMA. Bear in mind the shenanigans that go on an FOMC day. No real surprise that we're starting to see a little bit of movement. But it's not been too bad. We're still in the game. That 111,000 level. As long as we can keep above that 109,500. If you want to do 111,000 point of control over the last 35 days, 40 days, fair enough. But generally, 109,600 over the last, I was going to say 6 months, probably 5. As long as we stay above that, we're still within that fighting chance. And this is lined up for me to be taken. The fact that we started to take it through, get a little nibble, come back down. So I can see that happening and working our way through. So I'm cautiously optimistic that we'll go there. And I don't care how long it takes. Matter of fact, I don't want it to shoot through straight away. That is the straightest freehand line I think I've ever drawn. Anyway, I don't want it to shoot straight through. I would much rather we slowly and boringly take it through there, get back up to this level, and then start to make that move. Just so we can build some sort of stability, get that time and that confidence back within it, without ripping up with a green vector candle, which we know at some stage will end up recovering. So fairly happy with sort of how that looks on the daily time frame. Shame to get rid of that straight line. Surprisingly proud about that. In terms of the 4-hour candle, again, yeah, okay, we've had that move back down. The 200 EMA, I think that's probably more of a concern right now than the 50, because it's sort of held us back here and here, and we sort of faked through it with, unfortunately, a double top, and we've come back down. But as long as we can hold that, I mean, it's even 107,000 down here, but hold that level. I'd prefer if we held this level. So where this double bottom had its kind of almost neckline and where we've wicked down to already today, if we can hold that, then, you know, we're still keeping that market structure alive. We're still sort of building from it. Where things are going to start to get messy now. I'm going to draw another line. I'm going to have to do it wicks because that's on the wicks, or we could do it with the bodies. No, we can't, because I can't position it right. Didn't quite get down that body. But, you know, as long as we can kind of keep those, whichever you want to do, wicks or bodies. I'm more of a body man, so we'll keep it there for now. Keeping that going, then that's fine. You know, we get those pullbacks, we come back through. All of these vectors, they've all been recovered. They've all been recovered again. So we've got to get into this range. And that's the range that was on the daily. But everything else has been recovered. So we know, history has shown us, unless we are at the end of the bear market, these are getting recovered. Okay? We've just got to be patient enough to get there. And I go back to, we get some sentiment, some news like that, you will be amazed how quickly this will move. Right, okay, I was going to keep on going, but I think we'll go on to BitTensor and we'll go daily. So I haven't moved that level 452, which has failed to clear this line, and I'll do 100%, 90 to 100% size. I didn't do it the first time, wasn't around to do it, haven't really acted on it, and as I said, we're kind of cool. But regardless of that note, this line here has proved to actually be quite a strong level of resistance. We haven't really been able to grip ourselves away from it. Now, this is difficult because we had this move down, this move back up, and it's kind of created a bit of a weird disturbance within some sort of TA that I would have at least liked to have drawn there. Because had that not have been there, you could argue that we've just been basically snaking up this level. But the whipsaw action that we had with BitTensor over those couple of days, week or so, you know, really threw everything into the mix, and it has made TAing a little bit messy in terms of where we're going. But I think there's a few other signs that you can kind of have a look at that, you know, positive things are happening. For months, I moaned about us not breaking, you know, previous highs, and we were just making lower high after lower high. Those have been thoroughly thrashed. You know, even this one now has been taken out because we closed above it here. Okay, we immediately lost it, but when we came back down, we didn't, you know, we effectively fell to the next shoulder, this shoulder here, and then we bounced back up from it. I wouldn't be too upset if someone said, Harry, there's some sort of bottoming pattern off the EMAs there as well, which we're building through, and now we're just battling that kind of line there, which also happens to tie into that 452. So there's definitely, you know, a positive move that's been had there. I can't really get massively excited. I mean, it's lovely that it's happened. You know, 2 weeks ago we were down the low 300s. We're now battling 450 and moaning about the fact that it's taken us a couple of attempts to get through. But that being said, we're still at the same price we were at in July. We haven't really beaten the price that we were at in May or in February or in January. And, you know, a lot of us were still buying at this area. I mean, we've sidestepped as well, and we've been able to take some benefits from that, I accept. But we've got to make that next move. And unfortunately, this is really the key level. Got to get above that 460 level, 452, whatever I've actually drawn it at, and start building above those. And then we can really start to say, actually, BitTensor is one that is going against the grain for the altcoin markets. It is actually starting to do something, because right now, it just looks like every other altcoin that made a peak in December of 2024, and then we've struggled to kind of beat it there. And the reason that we're happy is because we went through 9 months of pain, and suddenly, over the last 30 days, this one's woken up far greater than most of the other ones. And if we try and go to the 30-day movement, which I don't have, do 90 days. I mean, even on 90 days, BitTensor's at 10. I bet if it was on 30 days, it'd be far higher. Can I quickly get that on? It's probably irrelevant, but I've started, so now I want to add it. Filters, no, columns is what I want. 30 days, apply changes. All right. So now we're fifth, a 42% change. Virtues we've already spoken about, and I'm going to have a chat about Zcash in a moment. But performed very well compared to the rest of the market. That's why we as a group are quite happy about how it has done. But there is still work to be done, and we're never happy. But I don't think we're really talking about certainly 5-figure BitTensor, certainly this cycle. And going back to Chris's comment here about discussing my thoughts on Tau prices, timeframes for selling this current bull run, when we'll be looking to sidestep prior to the halving. So to answer the halving point of it first, I don't care about the halving. That's my honest opinion. I don't think it has too much sway in price action. And it's great that they model themselves off Bitcoin, but there are probably hundreds of altcoins that have modeled themselves off Bitcoin with a halving schedule. And yes, I want to see the supply reduced down, just like anybody else. But I don't think it's going to have a massive impact on its price when it happens. I think it happens sometime in December. Just because it's modeled, just because it looks like BitTensor doesn't mean it's going to always, that Bitcoin's always going to act like it at those kind of events. So the halving isn't anything that I'm necessarily too worried about. In terms of price for me to get out, I don't have a price to get out for BitTensor. When I decide that I think the market has peaked, I will get out. And I may end up leaving that late. And that's a conversation for maybe a couple of weeks' time as to sort of where, what setups we might think are going to cause the market to peak. Unfortunately, these don't seem to be working too well. And maybe that's a time for another call, but none of these are moving. None of them have hit yet in terms of market peak indicators. Maybe another reason why this time is feeling so much different. So I don't really have a price range in mind of where BitTensor gets. I will say, and I am very different to other people's view on this, if BitTensor were to get to $2,000 this cycle, that would be amazing. I struggle to see how it would. It's my honest opinion. But if it did, that would be amazing. I think we need to have a conversation about whether it can even retake its all-time high. That's where I currently sit with it. It retakes its all-time high, and I am laughing because of the side steps I've done on the way down, and a lot of you have benefited from Tau. You are reducing your overall entry position into BitTensor Tau quite substantially. So we get back to all-time high, you should all be in a very good position. But I won't be holding any BitTensor throughout bear market, recession, whatever you want to call it. I'm not interested in that. And I will make a judgment at the next cycle, which will probably not include going straight back into BitTensor, if I'm honest, because I want to actually do this right and respect. I'm going to go to Bitcoin. But anyway, that's for another time. So I don't really have an answer, is what I'm trying to get at with where I'm going to leave. I will tell you when I do. I'll tell you when I phase out. Looking on the 4-hour time frame, again, I can't have any complaints with how BitTensor's doing on the 4-hour time frame. I mean, you can take an EMA and say, makes sense that it went back down to there, and it bounced off it quite nicely, and we are just building strength. Would I have liked the candles from yesterday to have closed higher than 454? Yes. But the fact that we've come back down, retested the 50, and we're starting to build our way back up, hey, we can get it in this next uptick, get above that, I'm happy. And then we can start talking about that 470 level, get above there, that's what we want. And then we can start talking about some of these ones. But really, that is a very nice looking chart in terms of recent action. Just now, it's hard. I don't think there's anything you can really draw to connect that. You'd be like, oh, well, I'll cherry pick if I want to get those ones in. I think at the moment, it's working. I would hate to see it fail here. Maybe that's what I'd say, because then we are just making consecutive lower highs. But even if it did, as long as it stayed above 380, kept on this 200 EMA, we're still making, sorry, it would make lower highs. Yeah, we're still making higher lows. I'd be all right with that. But I don't have a problem with how that's looking right now. In terms of sort of entries and longs, yes, I did have an opportunity to long BitTensor previously. That closed out on me annoyingly. When was it? It was Monday. It closed out on me sometime in Monday and then shot up. I just it stopped. That's just sometimes how it goes. And I haven't seen an opportunity for a re-entry yet. If I was really looking, maybe back at this 50 EMA would have been one. I didn't take it, and so it's got away. So I haven't done anything else with BitTensor on that one. Zcash. Why am I suddenly so interested in Zcash? That's why. That for me is something that I can trade. It has done remarkably well. I slept on this. I had no idea how well this had done until probably 2 weeks ago. Because it's not a token that I own or I've even followed. But I can perp trade this because right now it's got a hype and momentum just building behind it, which if you can just get a good entry in, then it's there. Now, I accept that there's a whopping risk because we're away from a lot of EMAs and we've left a lot of vector candles. So, I accept that there's going to be some drawdown at some stage. But until that happens, I would quite happily keep trading the hype of this. And so that's what I'm doing. I put in the trading chat that mistake I made on Monday, that I got in. But, I've held it, even down that drawdown. And it's now, quite significantly in profit. I don't have it open to show you how much, but we're doing okay with it. And it's just because whatever hype is behind this privacy coin, it is working. And at some stage it will roll over, but until then, I will keep on trying to trade. So I am just looking at Zcash a lot more just because it's something that I'm in. I traded the downturn of Sol down here. And now it's got to a point where I'm not really sure what to do with it. So I haven't, I've just moved on. BNB, we were able to get some of this up here, a little bit on the way down. Then I kept on messing up, so I sort of left that one on the wayside. But I'm just looking at, BNB again. This is very similar to Zcash. It just had a very positive move, especially when Asta was launching, and let's not forget CZ getting his pardon and all of that. But there was a positive momentum behind it, which just helps to sort of ease some concerns, I suppose, with taking the wrong side of any trade. And that's now kind of how I'm looking at it. Yes, I look for setups when we're in there, but for me, I'm wanting to find something that is relevant, that is moving. And which one were we on? This one here, Zcash. It's up in the last 30 days, 400%. Oops, that's not what I meant to press. And maybe there's some of these other ones that we can start to have a look at. But that's why I've suddenly got some interest within it. In terms of other things, so just to let you know where I am with my portfolio, I'm pretty much 50% Bitcoin, about 40% Tau, and then the rest of that 10% is either USDT because I'm perp trading, or it's Link and Near with a bit of SPX. I'm determined after whatever this pump is to just get rid of the Near and the Link. I think I can do more damage, probably the wrong choice of words, if I try and add that to the perp trade and just use that as collateral going through. It's going to be better than just waiting for Near. I mean, 2 years ago, I was talking about Near getting to $20. God, it'd be amazing if it got to $5 now. So it just my thought process on altcoins has just changed. I just don't really fancy holding them. And I'd rather just leave it in with Tau. And I know I badmouth altcoins a lot, but when you now see that 40% of my portfolio is still in an altcoin, I still believe in BitTensor. I need the price action to do something with it. Ethereum, what we're on daily here. It has recovered the fall and down to an EMA, but again, a bit like Bitcoin, just that 50 EMA is just beating it down a little bit. We are on the historic this cycle support and resistance level, so let's not try and write it off too much. Again, I suppose with Bitcoin in the sort of last 2 weeks, we are making higher lows, not quite higher highs. We're getting squeezed, but I just go back to if Bitcoin can move with the right sentiment, and it will lift the rest of the market. Dominance, I see us having a go at this. Probably what's left of this wick here. So this candle here. But I think some of this wick is going to get eaten back in terms of just Bitcoin having that move up. Yes, okay, Bitcoin dominance has come down today, but it's not falling far, and still just looks like it's just slowly moving up. And that's the strength that I'm talking about. Just slow and boring strength, just building Bitcoin back up against altcoins. I stand by. The longer that happens, just slow and strong, it's only ever going to elongate where we're going outwards. And if you want to believe that we're going into 2026 and deep into 2026, you want to see Bitcoin dominance climb back up to get that done. In terms of where the rest of the market is, NASDAQ knows no chill, and the S&P is fairly similar. The Russell has, regained from its wobble back to the 50 EMA, but it's done okay. Gold, it's over for gold. It's actually below 4,000. I know, 10,000 years to get above it, 10 days, and it falls below and it's over. But in all seriousness, this is just, it's a pullback. I think we've got to wait to see what test it does at the 50 EMA. There's arguments to be made that, it may have actually broken this trend line, and that could well be the case, but I think you just keep that going for the moment. Silver has fallen as well. That has already retested the 50 EMA, but it's something to have a look at. Coinbase, Circle, just not really doing too much. I did start buying Circle. I think I made you all aware of that. MicroStrategy, continuing to fall. I think Bijan sort of called that it was bear market time for this. And for whatever reason, it's not doing well. And that's why I never bought this as a stock. I think as an investment, just as into a company, I just don't really get it. If you're an investor, it's great that you're getting that long-term exposure to Bitcoin, but you're constantly getting diluted so the sailor can buy more. Anyway, I'll leave that there. Nvidia, $5 trillion it's now worth. Unbelievable. It is propping up the S&P, the NASDAQ. But if you hold it, then fantastic. Palantir, I was watching a video today showing how over prices potentially is. And if they were going through this sort of profit and earnings kind of ratio, and I think it's like, it needs to sort of stay on track for about another 500 years to get to its fair value, which is wild. TauX is there, we kind of covered it. Tesla's doing okay. But yeah, I think that's kind of where we are. I'm probably going to knock it on the head because it's been a long day. If I can find the right button. There it is. Sorry if that was a bit of a ramble. Like I say, I've been away. I've literally just come back today to try and pull all that together. I can't answer whether or not that was our last scare of the market. But if that was our last scare, I don't think it's particularly... if that wasn't our last scare, it's certainly given us a sort of a strong gut to take any further ones going through. You've got your positions now, what they may be, and some of you may be fortunate enough to bring in some money. I think maybe another question to ask is, I put this in Discord. If you're looking to do something new now for long term, is rushing into it now the right thing to do? Maybe have a consideration as to, could I wait 6 months, 12 months and find a much better entry position for a long-term gain? And, when we get into, whenever the recession bear market kicks in, we'll be talking about sort of the best time to enter. And it sounds counterintuitive, but in some respects, bear markets are the best time. And they're certainly where the wealth can be made if you're, strong enough, can stomach enough to sort of ride it out and then to get back in. Talk for another time, I appreciate. Time's away. There's no trading pub tomorrow. I'll try and do another charting video on Friday. It's still half term for me, so it would be very much whether or not I can get half an hour away from the kids, if I'm honest. But other than that, enjoy the rest of your week. Enjoy the rest. I was going to say it'd be weekend, but the rest of your week. You got any questions? Feel free to DM me, tag me. If you are now perp trading and want to talk about successes or errors, I'm always it for sort of sharing it and what have you. Setups. I know Alan and a few others are doing some good stuff in the trading thread at the moment. So feel free to contribute. Anything you're seeing in terms of setups. Anything you think's moving with momentum, I'd certainly be interested in looking at. But other than that, enjoy the rest of your evening, and I'll speak to you all soon. Cheers now.